Right, thank you. So for those of you that don't know, I'm Alex Naylor. I'm one of the founding directors of Gravitas, so welcome to the event tonight. I suppose we're trying to do something a little bit different from the norm. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of you do attend events where there's like a formal sort of stand-up presentation. We were thinking about trying to do something different with the form of a panel discussion. The sort of topic, the truth behind Agile, actually was born from a breakfast meeting that we actually did with a couple of the panel that were actually on it, and as an observer, I was one of those. It was quite a interesting topic. It was relatively heated-ish, and it sort of, it just gave me an idea, and a couple of months later, here we are. So, obviously, we'd like to introduce the speakers. I've asked them all to come up with a little précis of themselves. So, Andy, over to you.
I suppose that's what we should have been talking about before we started. So, hello everyone. I'm Andy McLeod. So I head up IT for Yorkshire Building Society Group. Past experience, I've bought and sold software, developed software for financial services and sold it to them. Now I head up IT. Agile, for the purposes of today's exercise, I'm the anti-agilist.
Chris?
Yes, my name's Chris Russell. I'm the CTO of a small identity company called Identity Protect. I come from the ZX81 generation. I know I don't look old enough. So that's how long I've been writing software or been involved in software. I've worked for big companies and small companies. So I've worked for O2, I've worked for William Hill in Leeds, and I've also worked for a couple of startups. I've been in agile and non-agile environments, and for the purpose of this discussion, I'm it's good, it's useful, but it's not the end of the world. It's not going to smash anything out of the ballpark. So I'm the voice of reason between these two.
That's a semi-boo.
John?
Hi, I'm John Lettuce. Been working in software development since the mid-80s, so I know it's hard to believe, but I've been around for a while. First started using Agile in 1999, so Agile isn't a new thing. That was the SCM. I use Extreme Programming, certified Scrum Master, certified Scrum developer as well. And for tonight, for some reason, I'm the pro Agile guy.
So, a little caveat for this evening. The opinions and positions are simply taken for the benefit of the exercise and are not necessarily endorsed by the panel. And really the idea of tonight, it's not really to inflate, it's not really to burst what is the bubble of Agile. It's simply to look at the practice of it and some of the successes and some of the failures. So what we're going to look at then is various Agile concepts, and I'm going to let these guys kick off from there.
Yeah, so I'll open this particular item. Who wouldn't want empowered teams? Who wouldn't want motivated teams? Who wouldn't want teams with buy-in? So Agile's not unique in that. However, what Agile does uniquely is it stamps that on the, on its tag, if you like. When I first came across Agile, coming from a software development background myself, I thought, well, this must have come from a developer, because what they're trying to do is formalise the way a developer would probably want to do it if they were doing it for themselves. They'd want to do all the interesting bits first, get something that they could see working, and then, if it was me, which is why I stopped being a software developer, don't bother with the boring bits. So I can see the benefit of empowered teams, but the challenge can be, what does that empowerment mean? So there can be the case where developers feel not only empowered but entitled. But at the end of the day, the software development team is there to serve a business purpose within the constraints of the organisation in which they operate. And so different organisations, that means different things. So if you're a company where software is the centre of your organisation, software rules, if you're Spotify, that's a different organisation. Is if you're a company where the product you deliver is not software. Software is an enabler to other things. And when software is an enabler to other things, that empowerment can become a bit frustrating for developers because they're not as empowered as much as they think they should be. But Agile in itself can't fix that. That's an organisational issue that goes beyond the remit of the Scrum Master or the head of development. And in some ways, that's where Agile can be missold or misused within the development environment. And that's where I think developers who think they're in an Agile development organisation can get very frustrated because they think they should be empowered more than they actually are.
Interesting point. Right, empowered teams, what that means is that developers are trusted, and that's a key word we need here. You need to trust your developers. And when I mean developer, that can be a coder, it can be a tester, it can be a technical author, it can be a business analyst. They're all developers for the purpose of Scrum, which is my preferred Agile framework. So what you're doing is you're saying we're going to trust these professionals to do their job that they're trained for and they're paid for and they're very good at doing, rather than having some evil manager like myself sit there and dictate to them, oh, I know better than you, I know when we can deliver that software, we can definitely have that feature by next Tuesday. How do I know that? The people who are writing the code, they all write code at different speed and test at different speed. They know themselves when they can actually achieve something, when something can be done. So empowering the team is let's remove that stress factor from them, trust them to come up with decent estimates. I have yet to come up with a programmer who comes to work thinking, I'm going to be lazy today, I'm going to do a really bad job. And I've been in this business for over 30 years. They come to work because they have a passion to create software. Allow them to run with that passion, but remove that stress, remove false deadlines that are imposed on them. Let them impose their own deadlines, because in Scrum you still need to get those stories done at the end of the sprint, but it's the Scrum team that is agreeing to actually get those things done and those story points done. And that is what empowerment is about, is trusting your guys to do a good job. And funny enough, if people feel that they're being trusted, they do a good job. It is your nature too. Andy?
Thank you. So there are a few words in there, words that bring emotion to the conversation, things like the evil manager. So that suggests then, if you're not working Agile, there are evil managers about. So I contend actually that good business practice and just strong leadership provides empowerment. And what is empowerment? Yes, it is about trust. But it's also giving people, and whether they're developers or not, the ability, capability, the courage to experiment, to make decisions. So for me, whether it's Agile or not, Agile can't claim empowerment. Good business practice is empowerment. It's good leadership. And then on to outcomes. Agile or any other method is just a method to deliver outcomes for customers. Agile might be one method, there are many others.
Okay.
So to just maybe summarise, this will be a recurring thing for me. If I go into an organisation and say, right, software development team, maybe testers as well, we're Agile, this is the way we do things. We're going to do things in an empowered way, and what I like about Agile is the transparency. I think that's a very powerful thing, very useful thing, and again it stops. I like the idea that we're not going to create false deadlines. However, I know from personal experience that if the business stakeholders and the project management office and the other people who can interfere, if you like, legitimately because they have their own function, don't get that or abuse that transparency as a way to, as a weapon almost, as a stick to the development team, then everything you want from Agile doesn't actually work. And so it's not Agile's fault, but also Agile is not the solution. Agile will not fix that. That's where it's about business practice and organisational appropriateness. And if you blindly say, I'm going to put Agile into this environment, it's not going to be what you want it to be.
So now you've both mentioned this term false deadlines. I'd ask, who's setting false deadlines? Who's doing that?
In my experience, senior management want everything yesterday and for nothing. So you start from that point and they will dictate, we need this software on this date. But they don't look at saying, well, we'll give you the resources to do that. And they don't talk to the experts to say, can it possibly be done that? Perfect example is, there's no point in turning to a room of 9 women and saying, I want a baby in a month. Not going to happen. Yeah, you've got the resources. You can make a Gantt chart that'll show you, you do month 1 pregnancy, you do month 2, but it doesn't work. You actually need to listen to the experts who actually know what they're doing, and they'll come back and say, we can achieve this. Or if the date's fixed, and Agile has the ability to say, right, we'll fix a date, we'll say, well, these are the features we can give you on that date. And that becomes a true, really achievable deadline. Whereas too often over the last 30 years, I've had situations where I've been given a project, or I've even gone in with an estimate, and management said, yeah, half it, right, do it, John, deliver. And I said, well, you've halved it. Yeah, because we know you will have added slack to that. No, I gave you the estimate I thought it was going to be, the best of my ability. And even then, trying to estimate for 6 months or 9 months down the line is very, very difficult. You're very good at estimating what we're going to do today, not so good estimating what we can do in a fortnight or a month. Terrible at what a team could deliver in 6 months or 12 months. So be honest with ourselves, be transparent, and say, we know what we can deliver in short doses. We'll show you exactly what we can deliver. Everyone can see what we promised to deliver. We'll put our hands up the end of a sprint and say, this one failed, we didn't get all the points we wanted done. Or, hey, aren't we clever, we've got more points. It's clear, it's transparent, but it's achievable and honest.
So I'm curious as to why it can't be clear and transparent and achievable and honest in using any other method. If there's a challenge with leadership saying, please cut it in half, and most of us have probably experienced something like that, is it not something to do with the experience that they have in the process that people have used to arrive at the estimate in the past?
Estimate.
Does Agile promote transparency and trust, or is it the leadership or the people or the project team that inspire that?
One of the things I like about Agile is it acknowledges the fact that estimates will be wrong, but more importantly, what people ask for is wrong. I want one of these, and you get to the end, and you say, well, that's not really what I wanted. So you iterate, and you reprioritize. So that's very, very useful. But again, that doesn't help the guy in finance who's doing a 6-month, 9-month business plan. He wants certainty, because in his world, that's what's required. So it's great that it exposes the myth that people know what they want and they can describe what they want, because they can't with any kind of accuracy. And also exposes the myth that the market will move more quickly than you can. So you're going to want to change your mind, and it's good that you change your mind. But it doesn't fix the other side of that, which is, what we're going to tell the stock market we're going to deliver in 12 months. What am I going to tell the investors when they're going to get their money back? What am I going to tell the partners who are waiting for this functionality?
Okay, this is a big misunderstanding of Agile. You can, if you do Agile planning, if you do release plans, you can say, right, these features we believe as a team we can deliver in 6 months. I tend not to go more than 6 months ahead, because it gets a bit too much to estimate. But 6 month block, we can give you these features. What we then do is flex how we implement those features. So you need to be able to select, say, a currency. Great. You can type in a currency code, or you could have a drop-down box, or you could have lots of whizzy things for doing it. So how you implement it is what you flex on, and that's what gives you the agile ability. You can still say, we're going to give you these key features, so there's absolutely no reason in the world why you can't turn around to your finance department or your sales team and say, we will give you a product that will have these key features in it. What we can't do is show you screenshots of what it'll look like in 6 months' time, because, hey, we don't know, because that's what we're going to flex on, the detail. But the key functions, yeah, of course we would. I work for software houses. We deliver product. If I can't tell my sales guys what's going to be in the product, I'm not going to be in a job for very long. It is that simple. So it's a myth. Agile can and does have planning.
So isn't that just delivering a thing then? It's just delivering a solution to meet a need in an iterative form. That's not agile, that's just delivering a thing in iterative form. You've just reminded me actually. I remember producing the first transactional website for the YBS group, and I did that screen dump, and I'm not a developer by the way, I'm not a techie, but I did that screen dump on a PowerPoint slide with hyperlinks. That was our first website, and that became award-winning.
Bar was low.
Not the PowerPoint, but the mock-up of it. That was someone who knew what the product needed to do. I took that product to Egg. I can use Egg now because we own that brand. I took it to Egg to launch their share plan scheme. And they said, yeah, we sort of like that, but it doesn't look like it's an internet site, Andy. I said, no, because we haven't made it yet. They said, oh, we like that idea then. Go make it. That wasn't delivered in an agile fashion. That was just showing the customer the product that they wanted.
That was actually the SDM, which is an agile methodology, which is about prototyping. Don't forget, agile comes from RAD.
So, the great thing I love about agile, it's like a cult. It has a manifesto, and everything in the natural-born IT world is now agile, according to Agile. Agile can't claim.
Unless it goes wrong.
In which case it's wonderful.
Is it really fair for Agile to claim every iterative development is an Agile methodology, or is it just iterative development?
Very good point. Agile grew up from experience, from developers. It was actually developed by a couple of guys in America who were software developers. That's what they did for a living. And the problems they had and they encountered. So what they're saying, the Agile Manifesto, then they got a number of software developers together and said, you know, what are the problems we suffer from? And what is a good practice we use today to overcome those problems? So yeah, it's not suddenly we've created out of nowhere this mythical Agile solution. It is actually all the ideas, the best practice, the things that worked. And what were the things that, you know, and there are lots of, and the iteration, I mean, before Agile Manifesto, we were developing software in iterations, but we've just added a bit more structure around that to make it easier to do. So the Agile frameworks allow you to be more successful, easier. Doesn't mean that you will definitely be successful. If you have a bad software idea, no matter what methodology you use, you will end up with a bad solution because it's a bad idea in the first place. If you've got, you know, a team of incompetent idiots, then, you know, you're not going to come up with fantastic software. If you've got a team of professional developers, Agile approach will enable them the best chance to come out with a good product.
If I can just move it on slightly, because you talked about this idea that, you know, we can definitely give this functionality, but it might be a bit clunky for want of a better word. So if we talk about maybe the concept of MVP, again, I like the idea of this vertical slice. So you see a bit of everything rather than, you know, a waterfall, build it sort of horizontally, you build it vertically. I like the idea of describing things in user stories, which is kind of what you did. You know, this is what the user would see. Love all that. But MVP, I used to work for a company, and I said, right, what do you want for your MVP? What's in your minimal viable product? And he said, well, when can I have it? Because what's in my MVP depends when I can have it. It's like, okay, you don't get this, do you? The minimal viable product is something that solves a particular solution that you think you can, you know, that we can then build on and iterate. And then they even invented, I don't know whether this is a common phrase or a common concept, of an MMVP, which is the minimal marketable viable product, which has enough bells and whistles that, you know, it's enough and it doesn't look bad in front of the competition. And we have this argument, and I've had it in a number of organisations where I say, what you're telling me is a product doesn't do everything is worse than no product at all. That's what I'm being told. And I look at this in two ways. One, you're an idiot. Secondly, but actually that's their job. That their job is to understand the market and what the market needs. So maybe I should forget my MVP idea and listen to the people whose job it is to decide what we need to launch with. And so, to me, again, it comes down to one of the key roles within Agile is the product owner role. And I don't think enough, there is a risk that not enough thought is given to that role, what the attributes of that role are, and what training and expertise that role needs. And again, it's not necessarily a fault of Agile, and you might say, well, if you've got bad anybody, but that's almost a new invention, that role. And Agile's invented this role, and businesses are asked to fulfil that role by the IT guy. Says, you need a product owner, and they drag someone from the business, drag him in and say, right, you're the product owner.
Very good point. Forgot to mention, I'm a certified product owner as well. So there is certification for that.
But I won't let you do that. No. Certification doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Right. The product owner is not a business analyst. It is, although quite often they are business analysts in the role, the idea of the product owner is that's the person who owns that product. That's the person who's responsible for making sure that product makes money. If it's a software house or meets the business requirements or gives value to the business. So they've got and if they focus on that, their job is to get value to their users, to their market as quickly as possible. And therefore, it's actually known as minimum marketable features, MFF. They're like the TLS.
Just what we need.
Yeah. There has to be 3 letters, doesn't it? So basically what the Agile approach enables them to say, okay, guys, you list in order those features. What's the most? If you could only have one feature, what would it be? And we'll develop that one feature first, because you've just told us it's the most important thing. You then tell us what the next feature is, and we'll keep on going. Now, it can be the case. For instance, I've got a couple of projects running at the moment, which are rewrites of brand new versions of existing products on new technology. The minimum marketable features is everything the existing product does. But how we implement it is how we can have some wriggle room, and how we can use an Agile approach. But to de-risk the project by doing feature by feature, developing it, testing it, getting it signed off, everyone's happy with it, that feature's in the bag, we can move on to the next one. We give the product owner a lot more confidence, because he can see that we're developing and see what we're developing meets his requirements and is the right thing for the business. But it is a very tricky role, and I would agree, it needs more emphasis. The product owners really need to know what they're doing.
Thank you. Because there's tons to go out there. I work in FS, let's add another TLA in there, 2-letter acronym. So I work in financial services, and in financial services we've got tons of TLAs. There's a whole glossary. I remember I had a risk coming in, and he was asked to shovel a bit of dung and go out and find out what the glossary of TLAs were in the business. And he found FLAs as well. And Agile has grown a new glossary of TLAs. It's brilliant. And to the uninitiated or the uncertified, it can be really scary. And Agilists, that was another word. We actually have a role profile. I'm an Agilist. Brilliant, love it. It's really creative stuff, and it's quite fun. But we've got to stop scaring people into Agile being the thing that delivers business outcome. Into iteration or MVP or MVF or MMVP, it doesn't really matter. If your business owner knows what they want, they should be able to describe what they want and what the outcomes for the customer should be. Now, if that means that they would happily give away 80% to get them on a trajectory which leads to a business outcome later on in the year or next year or the year after, then their accountability should mean that regardless of the deployment method, regardless of the project life cycle, that something is delivered. The only thing I'd say about certification, is anyone a scuba diver here? Oh, good.
Hundreds of them.
So there's enough to go out on this. Anyone Paddy? And anyone BSAC? So BSAC, right? You sit near the pool and watch people scuba dive, and that's part of your training. Paddy just dives straight in, yeah? So there's an analogy here between, I don't know, waterfall and agile. Paddy just crack on, you know? Bit of agile, bit of danger, but in both of those disciplines, we all get certification, and we pay for each certification, and it costs a bloody fortune. The certification, and how many are there? Scrum Master?
There's a number of different...
A dozen. Is it just an industry that's creating certification for certification's sake? And actually, a lot of the SMEs in the room already know the best direction to travel to create business outcome.
Certifications like O-levels, degrees, doesn't mean you can actually apply something brilliantly, but it means you've got a found understanding of it. So certification gives people an understanding that, right, at least you know what the concept should be. Applying them is something completely different. You know, we encourage our guys to do Java certification. It means that they can pass a Java certification exam. It means they've got a basic understanding of Java. It doesn't mean they're a good developer. But if they weren't, it wouldn't work for us. But fundamentally, so certification gives you a minimum level, and it means that a standard version of that idea or concept is getting out across the marketplace. So in theory, you could get a Scrum developer, a Scrum Master, or a Scrum product owner from one organisation, and they could very quickly get up to speed, like on day one, when they move into a new organisation, and that must be have benefit. Or if you're moving people around your teams in the organisation, each team should be doing it in a very similar way, and that certification helps with that. And that's one of the things, having a standard. And Scrum is a framework. It doesn't tell you how to do some of the bits. It just tells you you need to do these things. It's like testing is good. You need to do testing. You should test code before you release it. I mean, it's common sense. It's obvious. We've been doing that for years. But it insists that these things happen. It doesn't tell you, and to test code, you need to do X, Y, Z. You've got to run it through SonarQube or whatever. That's up to you how you implement it. But it does say best practice says you need to do some of it. And that's again with certification. And just a general framework to hang things off comes into place.
I'm going to just comment on two things, really. Firstly, I'm going to call foul on your on your example of a rewrite, because that's not the whole point of the iteration. For me, is information from the marketplace. So if you're just rewriting the feature, you're not learning anything. What you want to be doing is seeing what the market, whatever that market would be, thinks of your MVP, and that informs what you do from there on in. So I'm going to call foul on that. One of the things I lived through, and I do make it sound like a war, was ISO 9001, BS 5750. And I'm not, there's nothing wrong with BS 5750. In fact, if you apply BS 5750 to Agile, it actually fits quite well, because everything's traceable to requirements, and that's all ISO 9001 is ever about, meeting customer requirements. But it created a bunch of quality experts who knew ISO 9001, and they knew the standard and they knew what it meant, but they knew very little else. And that's where I understand what you're saying about certification, but that's where Agile becomes an end in itself rather than a means to an end. And that's where I start getting cautious about people who say, I'm certified this, I'm certified that. And also get cautious about the fact that all Agile teams all over the world should operate in the same way. Yes, you know, why is it right that I should be comfortable in any development team? So it's good that I understand the words, I understand what Scrum means, I understand what this means, but it doesn't mean I should fit in well, because they might be working in a completely different industry, completely different context, and therefore do things in a completely different way.
And the detail, how you implement it, is different team to team. You've got different technologies, you've got different domains. So I've worked across lots of domains, including financial services, gosh, all sorts of stuff. Motor trade, housing. I currently work in toxicology software, so it's a bit of a strange one. The concept of how a team should work and good team practice is across the board. How we do a build is different. The languages we use, how we do testing is different because the different domains have different requirements, etc. Funny enough, although we implement Scrum or we are an agile organisation, we also are 9001 certified. And it does dovetail very well, as long as you get the spirit of 9001 and not the red tape Jobsworth version of 9001.
Yeah, so that's a good segue into the point I was going to make on this. So standardisation isn't a bad thing. There was one study I saw, one presentation I saw, it was by a Gartner analyst, and it was in the Maverick sessions, so this is really go off piece slightly. And her studies were 95% of people are compulsive and 5% of people are impulsive, which suggests that 95% of us want to follow standards, one thing after another. The problem with standards, though, is it stifles creativity, and that's what we need to be careful about when it comes to certification or any type of standard. ISO frameworks, for some, are the nth degree, and unless you conform in every single sense, you should not be passing ISO. Most of us I've worked in ITIL frameworks, whether the leadership team calls them ITIL frameworks or not. What that's enabled an industry to do is standardise the language so we can speak to each other from function to function, from business to business. And I get that, and I think that's a sensible thing to do. To have to pay for certifications, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that, as I've already said. So there is a sense in standardisation, but I think the ITIL, I think as Alex called it, the ITIL bubble, the agile bubble, needs to be careful that it doesn't over-engineer things that are already in place and call it its own. Because some of these standards and some of these disciplines and methods are equally valuable and exist.
And I think one of the things on my list, I was talking about standardisation, which, again, I can see lots of benefits, is the agile ceremonies. They're not even called meetings, they're called ceremonies. The stand-up, the retrospective, the show and tell.
I was just going to say that's not on there, but I'll let you roll. I'll let you roll.
Allowed, Your Honour. And I like stand-ups because they're brief and they're useful.
Stop.
Oh well, they're not called stand-ups anymore, are they?
No, they're actually, if you're politically correct, they're called daily scrums. Because not everyone will stand up.
So this is a meeting where we all get together and have a conversation about what's going on, right?
Yeah. And
let's just say that then.
Well, and there are strict rules, and again, when people try and make the meeting as short as possible, we can't. No, don't talk about that. No, we have to have it done in 3 minutes, 2 minutes. What's the world record for the world's shortest stand-up? Let's do it straddle one leg so we can make it shorter. It's like, well, okay, don't bother having it at all then. Sprint planning.
Is there reflection time as well?
No, you do all your reflection at the end in the retrospective. So every sprint you have a retrospective. So every 2 weeks normally you think, how have we done in the last 2 weeks? Well, so every 2 weeks you reflect. Why are you doing that? Sprint planning are painful meetings. And you might say, it's just a framework. All the agile teams I've ever been in, they've always had stand-ups, always had planning, always had retrospectives.
Yeah.
And I sometimes, as a dev manager, as I was William Hill, I sit at that room full of people and I think, how much is this costing us? And are we getting value for money out of this meeting? And if we're not, why are we doing it? Well, we're doing it because Agile Framework says we have to.
Very, very good point. And I get a lot of criticism. 10% of your guys' time is spent in meetings. And you think, 10% of my guys' time is spent socialising around the problems and understanding the problems so they can go off and develop them quicker. What's wrong with that? You want them to work in isolation where they get it wrong, they go off down the wrong route. 2 weeks later they come back because I haven't told anyone, this is what I've got, it's the wrong thing. So talk and communication is good, and I've yet to meet anyone who thinks communicating is actually a bad idea. And some developers, not all of them, but some developers aren't very good at communicating. And the process in Scrum enables us to get around that problem that not all they're not all like us three. They're not all happy to talk. And that they do help. The stand-up is there for a purpose. It's actually, I call them standards as well. They're there to make sure, to answer three questions really. What did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And have you got any blockers? And the reason you ask those three questions is, if what you did promise to do yesterday you haven't done, the team needs to know that because there's a problem. Can you help? What you plan to do today, so the team know what you're working on. So if there's any dependencies, they can sort that out. And if there's any blockers, the Scrum Master, Scrum Master isn't a miraculous role. All it is a facilitator. He has two things. One, to make sure the team follows Scrum practice, which is easy. And two, he's the mouthpiece of the team. So he can go off, and if there are blockers, he'll go off and get the management help or support and leave the development team to get on and do what they do best, which is developing. Simple. So it has values. The meetings are time boxed. They're not time boxed with a minimum time, they're only time boxed with a maximum time. You shouldn't be taking more than this. And that's why it works out roughly 10%, or 1 day in every 10 is taken up by meetings. It's quite a lot. But they have a lot of value. The workshops would be a better term. If you sit there and say, right, we're going to spend half a day designing what we're going to develop for the rest of the week, you think, yeah, that's fine, don't have a problem. That's your Scrum planning session. You then have a session at the end, which is your review, which you show to the users what you've done, so you get your fast feedback. You get feedback, is this right? This is what we've done. Is also good for the development team, because if they've done the right thing, they get a bit of praise, and who doesn't like to show off? It's fantastic. But you're showing off, this is what we've done, is it right? Do we need to change it? And it gives the product owner and the users and other stakeholders, because any stakeholder can go to that meeting, the opportunity to say their bit and move the direction if it needs to. Retrospectives. I've had retrospectives that have lasted 5 or 10 minutes. Had a bit of chat, and it's emphasising what did we do well. I mean, you've got basically 4 questions, haven't you? What should we stop doing? What should we start doing? What should you do more of? And what should you do less of? Dead simple. And if something's going well, let's do more of that. That's cool. If something didn't go well, let's stop doing that and we'll try and do something different. If there's stuff to talk about, you set yourselves 1 or 2 changes. You never want to do more than 1 or 2 changes, because you need to change something, see how it runs. It's typical feedback loop. See how it runs, see how the change works. Did it get the desired outcome? Yeah, no. And then you do small changes. And the control loop, yes, you're right. Agile isn't going to own that one.
You've got to get the touche at this point.
So I'm imagining an old world, the world before Agile, where we had people with a title called team leader. Okay, and I'm imagining that team leader putting people in isolation and making it really difficult for them to work. And asking them not to communicate with each other. That's the old world, right? Now we've got Agile, which suddenly has invented great team leaders called Scrum Masters who help people collaborate and communicate with each other. I mean, really, is that the claim of Agile? So we can choose how we lead our colleagues in any sense, whether it's development or creativity. If we want people to be creative, let's all put them in isolation, or let's put them in an Agile project, or let's just get them working together. So there's just a few thoughts in there for me. And in this sense of creativity, there's no doubt that getting people to work together and finding them, giving them time and space and energy to be creative without a risk person in the room saying you can't do it like that. And we've all heard developers or some change manager or somebody or an architect say you can't do it like that. Give them the time and space to be creative, and let's have those conversations later. There's methods, blue sky, red water thinking does exactly the same thing. None of these things claim they're agile. They're just good leadership approaches. Let's communicate, collaborate. Let's not put people in isolation. let's bring people together. It doesn't need to be geographically together. Let's create an environment where people can talk freely about what the next steps are. I don't know whether that's in Agile page 62 or just good business practice. I'm not sure.
I think that's it's a fair summary. I mean, I run stand-ups, I run show and tells. Show and tells, certainly from my organisation, are very important. But a stand-up can be a valuable meeting. You go into an organisation, ask a developer, what do you think of the stand-ups? They'll say, these stand-ups, pain in the arse. Now, that might be because of the way they run. It might be because that developer just cares about what he's doing. Doesn't need to know about what anybody else is doing. He's got his head in code. He's got the next 48 hours or next 48 working hours, 2 working days. He's got to crack this. It's complicated. It's big. He don't want to get up, hear what everybody else is doing, which he's got no real interest in, just for that couple of days. So he'd be better off not going. Now, but he goes because that's the rule. That's the law. And I think for me that's it. Is the you talk about it's a framework, and how you do it is up to you. But there's an awful lot of people out there who will say every day, stand up 10 minutes, regardless, bang. And it's not always value for money, and it's not always motivating, and it's not always good. And people, I've been in stand-ups where there's been, you see people, they're not paying attention. They're not listening. They're going to say what they're going to say, but not listen to anybody else. And yes, there's an issue there that a scrum master or a leader can fix, but there's a problem there that Agile has created rather than solved, is my contention.
Look, I've been there myself. I've gone into organisations where they've had daily stand-ups and they have been pointless to begin with. So you need to explain to the team what's going on. And it's like anything, if you apply a process badly, it can actually end up giving you a worse result than if you do it properly. If you do it properly, the team are engaged about the problem. Now, you can get situations where you've got people who aren't engaged. If you've got people in the team who don't like working together, don't like working with people, if you've got people in the team who don't know what the big picture is, don't care what their little bit of code is going to do, then fine, but you do start to worry why you've got those people in a team, and that is something you look at. So Agile is not perfect, close, but not perfect. It's like Mary Poppins, practically perfect.
Well, I'm taking a spoonful of sugar right now.
But yes, if it's applied badly, it can have wasted time results. Or worse than that, people can think they're getting the right value and getting things out of it when they're not. But that developer, he's got his head down, he's got a tricky problem to do. But hasn't he always got a tricky problem to do? Hasn't he always got an excuse not to turn up to the stand-up? Therefore, if you remove the ability to say, we'll give you an excuse, you can have a cop-out, then he'll turn up, and he'll turn up when he needs to turn up, and he'll turn up for those meetings where he says he's doing something. So, but we've already got a widget that does that. Someone else already knows that there's a class and a method that actually does that piece of work. You don't need to develop it. And it's that kind of information you can get from a daily stand-up, if it's done properly. If it's done badly, yes, it's like everything. It's a complete waste of time.
So I'm going to try and grab a hold of this, because I feel like we might be like... So do we think we've covered everything?
I'd love to know this empirical.
This empirical based on performance. I know
Right.
that's coming from you. So
Scrum, the whole point of Scrum is, and most Agile processes, empirical is actually based on past performance. It's based on fact. It's not based on opinion. So what you're saying is you should be developing stuff and you should be forecasting and predicting based on what you've done in the past. So it's got 3 arms to it. It's transparency, so people can see what's going on and everyone can see. It's not hidden to the little development team. There's transparency actually when it goes up. I mean, we've got screens across our office that actually show exactly what we're doing in our scrums and how we're successful. And the CEO started looking at it and saying, oh, that team's doing more story points than that one. So I have to have a few awkward conversations. But after a while, he said, it's brilliant, I can see what you guys are doing. More importantly, we use a version Gantt that shows how the team are succeeding to the end goal. And you can see progress is being made, and they love it. They can, there's nothing hidden. I can't go in there and saying everything's green when, you walk around, there's Jira boards all over the office saying it's red, it's great. So transparency is important. Inspection is important. It's about checking things, making sure that what you've done is the right thing, and lots of iterations, so lots of inspection of things. And then, more importantly, and the reason we have the retrospectives, is adaptation. All right, you've done something, and it didn't give you the outcome you wanted. Well, you don't want to do it again and do it again and do it again, because you'll get the wrong outcome again and again and again. So the adaptation is, right, you've inspected it, you've seen how successful or not you've been, adapt that process, adapt what you're doing to get what you want. That didn't work, try again until you get the outcome. So those are the three things that the Scrum is based on, and that is a theory that's been around for a long, long time, way before the Scrum Manifesto and anything. So I'll give you that. Scrum is taking best practice from a lot of places and applying it, but by basing things on facts. I mean, extreme programming has the concept of yesterday's weather, and it's a great one because apparently yesterday's weather is 80% likely. Tomorrow's weather is likely to be 80% what it is today.
Raining then.
It's going to rain. Well, actually, it's about 100% likely. But the idea is that, therefore, if you were able to do this much work in the last 2 weeks, that's what you're going to do in the next 2 weeks. Don't imagine that for some reason the team will suddenly get more productive. Why? But if they do get more productive, then the week after that, the sprint after that, you'll be taking the fact that they are getting more productive. But it gets around, I used to have lots of projects where once the guys know what they're doing, they'll be far more productive. And then they're always expecting that for some reason you would catch up at the end of the project. Well, actually, you end up with really messy stuff at the end of the project and you fall even further behind. And Scrum gets rid of that. It makes it transparent and you can get to see what's going on.
I like the idea of Agile because it might eradicate this concept of shaping. Waterfall, shape, let's shape. Spend months on shape. Can we just get on and do some work?
Yeah.
Can we produce some output for our customers? So it might get rid of that, but I fear it might not, because everybody needs to know what they're doing. And that understanding of knowing what they're doing has to come from, you call them the product owner, right? It needs to come from the business unit that's providing a service to customer. It has to come from them, because they know the customer more than we do. And unless they're articulating that well enough, it doesn't matter what method we use, we're going to be stuck in a cycle of, did it work? No, it didn't. Just curious, can you expand on this notion of empirical based on performances based on fact?
Yeah, it's history, it's what you've done in the past.
Is that a suggestion to say that other methods are not based on fact?
If you're setting up we'll take Waterfall, you're going to do a Prince2 project, it's going to be 12 months worth of development. You're going to spend I want to win here because you've done like Prince2. You do, your 3 months design, you've got your gate, yes, you've got your gate, you've got some milestones through that. But you're going to estimate how long 12 months worth of development is going to take. You're going to produce a wonderful Gantt and it's going to be set in stone and everyone's going to believe it because, hey, it's a Microsoft project, so it must be true. It's a wonderful Gantt. It's there. You've got all the dependencies in there. What can possibly go wrong? Normally, by the time you get the plan and you were supposed to start 2 weeks ago and you haven't, so the plan's already wrong. So, all right, you can do benchmarking, you do all sorts of clever stuff, but it gives you a false idea of the truth.
But the problem with that method, you mentioned Prince2 Waterfall, if we promise that the output's going to be delivered in a certain time, then that's our fault. We've made that promise. We can equally say, this is the direction of travel, this is broadly what it will take, this is broadly what it will cost, meet the shareholder needs, meet the FD's needs. We can say that too. We can say this has a confidence level of X. And yes, it might be baked into stone, but it still had a confidence level of X. And if we weren't influential enough as leaders to maintain that statement throughout the course of the development, then that's not a problem with methodology. That's a problem with influential leaders or not.
how many of us, I'm sure we've all been in sprint planning meetings where someone's been asked to estimate a task and they say, oh, it's only about a day and a half. No, story points. We need story points, not a day and a half. We need story points. Okay, how many days to a story point? Well, who's fooling who here? You know, people estimating days. And I understand, to me it's a case of diminishing returns. One of the things that Agile and sprints can be is a little bit introspective, a bit navel glazing. It's a bit like you're concerned about what we want to do is get on the right code, yet we're trying to measure our velocity. And to measure our velocity, we have to do this, we have to do that, and we have to do... So don't think about days, think about points, and then we'll work out how many points there are to a day, and and this thing will iterate, and we'll get better and better estimates as the day goes on, and we'll have our retrospectives, and we'll do this, and we'll do that. And pardon my language, but I remember when a developer said to me, I'm just here to write fucking code. And that's what he felt. He felt all this was periphery, all this was getting in the way. You know, he would sit in retrospective and say, just let me write code. That's what I want to do. That's what I'm here for. And that's, whereas I think there's a lot of merit. There's a point where a case of diminishing returns, we say, actually, do you know what? We'll just estimate in days because that's what people do. And, you know, we'll just get on. I think we all would agree. We just want to get on and deliver stuff.
It's just fudging the biggest estimate, though, isn't it? Waterfall says that's the big estimate, and all Agile does is we'll just break that down into small pieces. But don't worry if we get those a little bit wrong.
You can't estimate at 4 either because it's not Fibonacci.
But I'm going to give you 5 minutes to like finish this, and then we're going to stop it. So you've got sort of split between you.
Just one final point then on this. When we're talking about estimates and statistics, right? So Gartner, Forrester, look at whichever measure, but between 40 and 60% of projects fail on time to budget. Projects. So there's something wrong in the industry. I get that, right? And the methods are driving for improvement and striving for not necessarily perfection, but we can't claim perfection because 40 to 60% of projects fail on time to budget. Agile's not going to solve that. There are other things outside of Agile or any other methodology. If a business unit doesn't know what it wants, then we're going to struggle. If the C-level are not behind us, we're going to struggle. And by the way, then there's compliance and audit. And some of us face those more than others, perhaps, depending on the industry we're in. Are any auditors certified? Well, sorry.
Just check with the auditors.
Apologies. But you see where I'm coming from. So unless an auditor or a compliance or a second line of defence person understands the outcome, then they're going to mark any project down as failed. So it's important, regardless of the method, that the engine that assures us that things are okay are equally understanding of the methods in use, whether it's Agile or any other method. And I think that's one of the challenges that Agile faces, is because it's become a science that the rest of the organisation hasn't caught up with. I think that's a challenge. And that's a bigger challenge in some industries. Right, if you're a software house and your responsibility is to provide software for a client, I've been in that space. It's very different than if you are providing services to customers. Your compliance methods are very, very different. So that would just be a cautionary note from me. Will it improve 40 to 60%? I don't know. Jury's out.
If you time box it, definitely will.
Oh. Chris, any final comments from yourself?
No, I agree with an awful lot of what Andy just said, really. I think it's a useful set of toolkits, a useful set of tools. But if you just take those tools and don't acknowledge the context in which you're using those tools and why you're using those tools, it's not going to give you what you think it will do. In some ways, it's a waterfall world for many of us. Some of us work in waterfall organisations, and if we think we can change it from within, chances are we can't, and so we have to acknowledge that.
I'm going to time box you. What's your final comment?
What I was going to say is people get really hung up about estimating. There's one thing you can guarantee about estimates, they're wrong. So don't sweat about them, don't waste a lot of time on them. What you want to do is be consistently wrong, and then Scrum and Velocity will actually handle that for you.
Okay, so I'm going to try and summarise, which I think is going to be quite difficult, but we'll roll with it. So, John is obviously our evangelist, and in case you hadn't guessed, it's empirical. So we basically said uses transparency, inspection, adaptation, basically to continue to plan and improve. And then this idea of empowered teams, which helps to reduce stress levels, apparently. Removing deadline pressure, we've got improving estimation, getting team buy-in, and improved communication between functions, which ultimately is allowing that visibility to the objective and benefits of a project. Is that a good summary?
That sounds fantastic.
That's all right, it's
Better than I
good.
did.
Yeah. Chris, obviously our mediator sat on the fence.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we need to understand why it's agile, not just what's agile. So if you don't know why you're adopting the techniques, ultimately it's just going to lead to disaster. I think you referenced this at the end, but needing to understand sort of really what context we're working in. Agile can work in a waterfall world, but you need to be clear, obviously, on the rules of engagement. And then finally, product owners are key.
Yeah.
Absolutely key. Without the role being filled by a person with correct training, skills, knowledge, authority, am I going to say certification?
No.
No, okay. You may struggle, all right? And then finally, Andy, I mean, it's just all about good business practice. I don't think that came out as much this time round. But good communication, good engagement, collaboration, good leadership. The leadership piece, I think, is the key bit within it. And that the work always needs to ultimately serve what is business outcomes. And then the final bit around things can be agile in parts, but is your IT strategy aligned to make it happen? And I'm not sure, and it did come out a little bit. But this idea around architecture may be a constraint rather than change the architecture over time, because that ultimately will make the change easier. And that sort of element of should we really be driving software development, actually buy it or let someone else do it. So, any final points? No, I'm not going to give you any more final points.
Yep. So
we're going to move on to the next bit. I'm conscious of time. If people want to get another drink and maybe grab a bit of food, there's a compliment slip on everyone's chair with a pen. We're going to try and make this next bit a little bit interactive. So questions or statements. We have got a microphone that we are going to pass around at that point. You're not going to hear yourself, apparently, but you are going to have to hold it because obviously we're recording it and that's how ultimately it comes out. So the time is sort of 7:45. If I give everyone sort of 5-10 minutes to grab another drink, grab a bit of food, and nip to the loo. The toilets, by the way, are out by the lifts. The gents are on the left-hand side, the ladies are on the right. And yeah, we can be back here for about 5-2, and then we'll have a sort of question answer session of some sort. So, but round of applause to the guys. Thank you so much. Who's got questions? Oh, Anthony, I'll come over to you. Anthony, there.
There we go. Hi there, Anthony Wood from the University of Leeds. I'm very keen, I'm actually asking all of you actually, have you ever used a mixed model of Agile and Waterfall, and has it worked if you have?
Well, I'm going to say yes.
On the fence.
I'm going to say yes, but we probably didn't realise it was agile. It was something else, as I've sort of described. It was people talking and collaborating and getting it done, and it was getting done iteratively, and we had the business owner and actually the end customer in the room. So I guess so, yeah. Now, did we have a Scrum Master and stories and TLAs and all the other certification people in the room? No, we didn't. We didn't have any of that. So it was probably not as sort of structured, but it was collaborative and it delivered.
Similar answer for me, really. And it comes back to rapid prototyping. Building something quickly, showing it to a stakeholder, iterating from there, and that then grows into a product. So we, as you say, we wouldn't have called it. We would have called it rapid prototyping, I guess, or so a kind of a. You got your main work, and then it was a separate side project which was done in a rapid prototyping way. It at the time was successful, and what it really showed you is the value of iteration, and you can do that in waterfall obviously as well. But yeah, that's my experience.
Yes, in two different ways. I've gone from waterfall to Scrum through a process of starting to get more iterative. So, for instance, we introduced the technology the guys were using at the time was Progress. So we introduced a 1 month iteration. We didn't call it a sprint, where they would develop for a month and then pass it to testing. We would test that for a month whilst they go on to the next iteration, and then slowly we brought the testing into the iteration. And then lo and behold, we added a few TLAs and called it a sprint. And before they knew it, they were actually doing. We'll say before they knew it was about 2 years. They ended up in a Scrum approach. But that was a way to get a team and a management team buy-in into this. So it's all about showing that we could deliver, and it did help us deliver. And we say waterfall. If you do it properly anyway, it's just there's no reason that you have to do everything and bang, you have one delivery at the end. What we currently do is I have a very agile, or we follow Scrum for the development process, but projects themselves are bigger and more complex. So the stage at the early part of a project, where you're trying to get basic requirements and getting an understanding of what's the business case for doing this piece of work, and is it actually going to generate us revenue, and looking at the market and stuff, and then the release and the marketing strategy and how we release things and timings, and getting that information is managed in a more traditional waterfall style project. The bit in the middle where we build is Scrum, but we actually do have more traditional and have project management, and we work very closely with the project management team.
If I may, there's one thing I'd add to this as well. I've worked with a rather large UK systems global, but UK-based systems integrator, and they did a fantastic job of convincing our development team, the development and test team, that ITIL and Agile don't get on, and I had to work incredibly hard to undo that, because ITIL and Agile do get on if you want it to. When I uncovered what they meant by that, they talked about release cycles and how release managers perform. What they misunderstood is that release managers are risk managers, and they were calling out risks, not stopping things happening. So in that agile concept, we have to encourage non-agilists to understand what we're both up to together, and that's more about understanding the needs and outcomes of the business and how we work together. So for those who are firm in the ITIL, there'll be modifications, but that's a good thing. And it's not because of Agile, it's just smooth release. So.
Cool. Next question, Tim, at the back. Thanks, George.
Gentlemen, fantastic debate. Thank you for that. Tim Craven from Equinity Bank Credit. My background is in complex enterprise applications in regulated industries. What's your view, and how do you maintain the architecture of complex products within an agile environment?
I won't go on that.
Whilst we've bumped into each other, Agile does not say no architecture and does not say no design. That is a myth that you need to understand. So yes, you can develop your architecture as you go along, but you need to have a framework to work in. You need to have an understanding of, does this product need to scale? What's the security implications of it? What kind of servers and databases do you use? So we actually have a high-level architectural design at the start. Don't call it sprint -1, because you will get Scrum people after you on that one. But we do that, and that is some of the stuff that I said happens in our a sort of pre-development project. We understand the architecture, understand a lot of the non-functional requirements. So you need that, you need the architecture design, we have a framework, and then the detail we can develop as we go along. And, you know, with the concept of fail fast, or I prefer succeed fast, where you try and do the hard stuff first, make sure you can do it, and then you move along that way. So, and you've got spikes to test things out. So it does work. We work in quite complex structures. I mean, it's what I'm currently using in toxicology is a bit of a strange world. It's not transactional based. It's all about complex queries. But I've worked in banking and I've worked in housing and insurance and accounting, all using agile methodologies. And yeah, you need to understand your architecture. You can't start developing and think, I wonder how many users, is this going to be a desktop app? And then realise you're actually developing a web app for 1,000 users or something. You need to know those things up front.
I'll go first because I know you're going to need half an hour. I just don't know. I don't think Agile addresses this sufficiently. To me, an architecture is there. The difference between an architecture and a design is a design to meet the known requirements, and an architecture allows you to flex your design to meet future unknown requirements. And it takes skill and experience, and it's a vital job. However, the Agile premise is that you don't know what those future requirements are, because you're going to change your priorities every 2 weeks. I spoke to an architect once, and he basically had the concept of a minimum viable architecture, which is the kind of best answer I've heard. You know some things about those future requirements, you know some fundamentals, and then your architecture evolves along with the product. That is the best I've heard, but I think it's a very pertinent question, and it's not one I pretend to know the answer to.
Yeah, for me, it's an IT strategy that's in play here. I've asked our architects. By the way, if enterprise IT is about 35 years old, that makes an architect about 16, and 35 and 16-year-olds don't really get on. So there's something in that story, first of all. But the main point here is that should we be building the IT? If you're not an IT house, an IT shop, a software shop, the question for your business is, should it be building the IT? Building society, should it have an IT shop? And I'm not endorsing all outsourcing of IBS, but strategically, because we've got technology which is 20 years old, which in financial services is quite young, really. The applications are, slow. We're not creating enough speed for mortgage processing, etc. and working on that. To develop velocity in application design needs a change in architecture. So there's one concept I've asked the architects to look at, which is just a pace layering lens to what your architecture or your applications do. And to summarise what that is, it's pretty much a triangle, and at the top of that pyramid rather, that's where you've got your fast-paced change, your fast-paced application change, your fast-paced architecture changes, and then at the bottom is the slower pace. So typically, systems of record would be, for us, that's your infrastructure and your core mortgage application for us. And then at the top, system of innovation would be something like, probably for us, the website at best, where you can change customer journeys faster. But when the transaction layer of that has to talk to the bottom layer, then that's where the problems are caused. So regardless of what the outcomes need to be, we all want it faster and quicker and better and cheaper. The only way to do that is rethink your architecture and slowly move it out to someone else who's an expert at it. And yes, it will get in the way of Agile. That's not to say, good collaboration, leadership, call it Agile, call it whatever, doesn't have a value, but architecture will be a constraint. So I would just urge people to revisit their IT strategy and look at what is slow to change and think about the how to make that faster over time.
Other questions? Oh, Keith. Gentleman by the side.
Hi there, Keith Williams at Sunbrumming Solutions. Do you think there is a geographical limit to past which Agile becomes less effective? The reason I ask that, as Alex will tell you, we've just finished a massive onshoring project and things are considerably better and more Agile, lowercase a, since everyone's sat in the same room. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on, is if you've got a software team that's split over 4 continents, is that a bad candidate for Agile? I don't know, what do you think?
John, this is you.
Well, fundamentally, the closer you sit next to someone, pair programming is very difficult if you're not sat next to each other, for instance. So yes, people in a room, that is the best setup for any project, be it waterfall, be it agile, be it whatever you're doing. It's a lot easier if you've got people together. Agile does work when you've got remote sites. I have remote teams. I've got a team in Poznan in Poland, and I've got a team even more remote in Newcastle. And I'm allowed to say that because I'm a Geordie myself, which is a posh one. So and therefore we have language barriers. No one can understand the Geordies. And yes,
What?
they are. I come from so you've got language barriers. You've got lots of tools. So we use Slack. We use all sorts of technology and Skype and various to help us communicate, but is it as good as having people in the same room? No. So guess what we do twice every fortnight? We have the product owner and the testers go up to Newcastle and have the key scrum meetings in Newcastle where they're all face to face together. Again, we have the same problem with Poznan. We tend not to ship people to Poznan as often. It's simply because if you've ever flown Wizz Air from Doncaster, you've got to be quite evil to send someone on that flight every fortnight.
That's the second time you said
Evil
evil.
manager.
Oh dear. The mask is slipping, isn't it? But yeah, so you try, but so the more split and diverse your team is, the harder it's going to be. You also get more cultural problems. I mean, the idea is if you sat next to the tester, you can show a bit of code, is that right? Yes, no, or the tester will find a bug. Rather than logging it in Jira or Bugzilla or whatever system you're using, the first port of call of the tester should be, "Oi, Fred, I've just done this." And sometimes you can kill off a bug and all the paperwork and all the extra hassle there and then because the programmer says, "Oh, you've got the wrong end of the stick," or "Quickly there, try it now," or "It works, great." And that's where Agile works brilliant. So, not perfect, but it does work remotely.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you look at Wikipedia and look at Agile, one of the first bullet points is co-located teams, and I think one of the things about Agile, it came out of that world. It came out of the world of developers on bean bags in Silicon Valley or whatever, being in the same place, having that energy, and to try and do that when you're not in the same place, it doesn't work as well, I think. And William Hill, for example, that was part of our Agile process was the 3 amigos, where the developer, the business analyst, and the tester agree they've all understood what the tester is going to test before he gets it, because it saves time and it saves paperwork. You can't do that if they're not in the same place. So yeah, congratulations on bringing everybody back on shore. I think it's a good thing. I think it's the right thing to do.
Yes, but not because of Agile.
Is it just good business practice?
Well, your chief officers sit together for a good reason. Organisations have allowed people to work from home and then realised actually they didn't have the right tools or collaboration suites or whatever. Skype was a bit dodgy. Or, how many of us have, sat in a telephone conference listening to people opening doors and X, Y, and Z's just joined. There's great YouTube clips on it. So it avoids all of that stuff. We've been deliberating whether we move dev into ops from Broadgate, Leeds to Bradford. But then I've got teams in Lynchwood. I've got an agilist who says, well, you need to come up to Broadgate for a meeting, a stand-up. They're in Peterborough. They don't need to. We've got video conferencing. Have your stand-ups in a more creative way. So I do think geography is important. I really do. But it is good for many other reasons. But I think as technology advances, the opportunities to work remotely will improve. But for now, yeah, definitely.
Can you just add our stand-ups with the Polish and Newcastle team? They stand up around one monitor on either side, but both sides do actually stand up.
Yeah.
Other questions? No?
Actually,
Oh.
yeah, I thought.
Okay, Craig.
With respect to empowering the teams, and this is more the human aspect, and it's coming from experience I had with a previous project, is, and this is more with the junior developers, those that don't have the confidence, that in the daily stand-ups or daily scrums, there's a group, and they felt more intimidated about presenting the fact that they had run into obstacles or problems. They didn't want to be seen as not being able to overcome these. And I was just wondering if you have any techniques, I guess, or how do you empower the individuals to have that confidence to speak up within a team?
That's a very good question. We have started a week ago a couple of placement students. We do placement students. I've also had graduates, so I have some very inexperienced people in our Scrum teams, working in our Scrum teams from day one. So fundamentally, it's down to culture. If you don't have, and it's nothing to do with Agile, this is just good business practice. You need a culture in your organisation that encourages support and encourages teamwork. And if you haven't got that culture, then yeah, you're perfectly right. People are, a lot of developers, a lot of technical graduates and stuff, by nature they are quite shy, they are quite quiet. You know, there might be a girl in the room, so they'll definitely not talk. So it is about getting that culture. We do mentoring. You know, we encourage the guys to do pair programming. So the first few problems to do, you know, they're actually sat there and they're working with someone on that problem from day one. Then when they get a bit more confidence, to work on it, we allow them to pick the tasks that they think they can achieve. We'll politely explain to them, maybe that one's a bit hard for you. We'll come back to that kind of level later. But it's all about support. The team succeeds, the team fails, and you need to get that message across to people quite early. And you know, if you've got a supportive environment, be it whatever job you're doing, you're going to be more productive. If people are sitting there saying, no, go away, I'm not going to willing to help, I'm too busy. I mean, the "I'm too busy" really annoys me. Occasionally, someone is working on something, they've got a tight deadline, they have to deliver something, so it's "I'm too busy, I'll come back to you in a couple of hours," and then they must come back to them. So we're allowed people to do that, but it's a card you can't play too often. But it's culture.
Yeah, for me, you know, breaking down the word culture, there's just some aspects we've done, and it's, as you say, it's not about Agile. This is just about leadership and engaging everybody in the organisation. You know, so we do peer group reviews, and we ask the juniors to do that. We've got apprentices. These guys are 16 years old. We've got 4 out of a team of, in Bradford, out of a team of 170. This year I'll have 10 apprentices. And these guys are frankly shocking the boots off the oldies in the room, the experienced guys. They're coming in with freedom of thought, creativity. We're allowing environments of experimentation, call them hackathons, call them what you will, but rooms and environments. And one thing I've really encouraged all of the oldies to think about is don't say no. Don't squash the idea. And how many times have we've advised leaders not to do that. The other thing about the youngsters is they are inspiring the older generation. You know, I've just had a guy retire after 35 years. He built the system, this guy. And he's been inspired. It's given him a purpose because he's mentoring. But he's mentoring beyond development. And that's uplifting the confidence amongst everybody. So it's those little nuggets that are really helping us.
I mean, for me, it's slightly different. I mean, I like working with developers. I love the sense of humour. I love the creativity. I love the cynicism, the disrespect. You know, I really enjoy that. Yeah, and so I embrace that. So where you say the Scrum Master's not a genius role, But it's a bit like you've got to do a 10-minute act every day. You've got to be a compare. And so the way you make stand-ups bearable is you try and have a fun and you have a laugh and you take the piss and whatever. And you have to judge that with the people you're working with. It's a serious meeting, but it doesn't have to be done seriously. As long as you get the facts out, that's fine. So my approach has always been to set that tone where, you know, we don't have a blame culture, I just need to find out whose fault it is, kind of thing. So you don't take yourself too seriously. And that means that people aren't afraid. Everybody gets it in the neck, whether rightly or not. So that's my own personal approach, is to set that tenor of the meeting. And you need the right people to do that. If your Scrum Master is dry as anything, then that's when it can get a bit, you know, a bit daunting. But if everybody's just relaxed and having a laugh, you're still doing what you need to do, you're still getting information out, and everybody just feels slightly more relaxed about it. So you need a Scrum Master who doesn't take themselves too seriously and can not take anybody else too seriously either. It's an approach.
Okay, I'm conscious of time because you
Yep.
need to.
I'm going to agile.
You're agile your way back down to
In
London.
a waterfall method between station to station.
So if I can just wrap up really quickly, obviously if people have got any other questions we can deal with them obviously once Chris has disappeared, but when we've obviously been talking behind the scenes about this whole topic, one of the key questions that came up was, okay, will Agile be around in 10 years? So I do just want to pose that question and I'm going to time box you as to how long you answer it. But guys, what's your thoughts? Will it be around in 10 years' time? Andy, I'm going with you first.
Yeah. There's too much of an industry and a manifesto and a cult for it not to be around in 10 years' time. It articulates and reminds us all of what good practice is. I care less about the developer skill set and all of that, because that'll be around in 10 years. But don't forget, technology's changing, so less people will be developing anyway. It'll be about fixing APIs to APIs. So let's face facts. So it'll be agile API, whatever, I don't know. But definitely, to say it won't be would be wrong. To say good practice, good leadership skills, you know, collaboration, communication, those things must improve if we need to accelerate IT and software development and improve outcomes for customers.
Chris?
I often interview developers out of university, and what I'm trying to do is get their understanding of object-oriented programming. And it doesn't go very well because they kind of take it for granted, because that's all they know. They haven't done the basic or the assemblers or the C that our generation have done. And that's what I think will happen to Agile. It'll be kind of taken for granted. It won't have a name, it will just be kind of embedded. Bits of it, the best bits, will just be the way we do things. In a similar way to the way Waterfall was. Let's start at the top, decompose, recompose. Agile will just be taken for granted and will kind of disappear and be replaced by something else.
Okay. John?
It's like democracy. It's not perfect, but it's the best we've got at the moment. It will evolve. It is evolving. There's Nexus, which is scalable, agile. So the next few years, you will see it keep on evolving. I don't think Waterfall was actually called Waterfall until Agile came along. So it could well be that, you know, as you say, it loses its name, but then it may morph into something completely different. But good business practice and about working in teams, I can't see that going away, and showing your end users, your customers, what you're doing. It makes common sense. So I think a lot of the elements are common sense, and hopefully in 10 years' time we'll still have common sense.
Hopefully. On that note, right, thank you so much for this evening. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. It's certainly been fun preparing it, and I hope you've had as much fun as we have, obviously, listening to it. Again, feedback is always welcome. Any ideas on any topics of conversation, etc., that you want us to do in the future, please do let us know. And on that, I will say thank you and good night. And thank you to the guys as well. You've been tremendous, as always. And yeah, round of applause.